anyone can watch this meeting at any time with an internet connection. There are subtitles available on the YouTube broadcast. These are generated by YouTube. These are not the responsibility of the council, nor are we responsible for their accuracy. There is a delay between the meeting and of the YouTube broadcast of approximately 30 seconds. Webcasting officer, please can you commence the broadcast and confirm?
I can confirm we're live, yes.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee on Tuesday the 16th of March 2021. Before we commence with the proceedings this evening, I can confirm that the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for its remote meetings, and these are as follows. Please only speak when the Chairman invites you to do so. Members, please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak through the chat function. The Chairman will introduce speakers in the order at which a request has been made unless there is a point of order at which we will give way. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting. Members are asked to mute your microphones when you're not speaking and to consider turning off your video if you have interference on your connection to this meeting. Please bear in mind that there may be a lag between speakers and other attendees hearing you. Presentations will be visible on the screen this evening. They'll be shared by the officers. If you have any issues with viewing these presentations, please indicate on the chat function. When referring to officers' reports, please quote the relevant page and paragraph number. There is no business for this evening of the Planning Committee. However, if it is necessary to move into private session, it is members' responsibility to make sure that your venue and connection is private. If you lose connection at any point in the meeting, please attempt to rejoin the meeting and I will readmit you. Please only use the chat function for the purpose prescribed for requesting to speak or for a point of order. The chat function is subject to the access to information regimes of FOI, EIR. It is also subject to data protection, rules of defamation and the Council's Code of Conduct. To assist with managing the meeting this evening, the agenda items will be placed in the chat function. I can confirm that the meeting is quorate of the members required to attend, and the Planning Committee consists of the following members. The Chairman is Councillor Wendy Scattergood, the Vice Chairman, Councillor Ona Parker. The rest of the committee comprises of the following members: Councillor James Abbott, Kevin Bowers, Tom Cunningham, Patrick Horner, Hilton Johnson, David Mann, Andy Mundy, Frankie Ritchie, Gabrielle Spray, Nick Unsworth, Justin Wrench. This evening we do have apologies from Justin Wrench. We also have officers in attendance. These are Katie Towner, Area Development Manager, Matthew Wild, Senior Planner. We also have in attendance Alison Webb, Governance Officer, who will be clerking the meeting and, if necessary, reading public question time statements. And my name is Emma Wisby, I'm the meeting facilitator. To help distinguish councillors and officers on the broadcast, councillors have a prefix of CLLR and officers have a prefix of officers. Registered speakers have a prefix of PQT. I will now hand over to the Chairman, Councillor Wendy Scattergood. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much indeed. Good evening, members, and welcome to our meeting, on the third week running. We've been working overtime. I'd also like to welcome residents watching on YouTube, and just remind you, we all know the rules now, that if you wish to make contact with me, please do it via the chat function. I'll go straight on with the meeting, and the first item is apologies for absence, and as you've heard, we have apologies from Councillor Wrench. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As mentioned earlier, probably an over-declaration, but an NPI in agenda item 5C this evening. My sister was a former employee at White House Business Park. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I do not see anyone else. No, no one else. So I go on to item 3. I have the minutes of the 9th of March. Those of the 16th of February are still not ready. So does any member wish to raise any points on the minutes? If not, I need to have a mover and a seconder, please.
I'll certainly move.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mann. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Members, they have been moved and seconded as a true record. I will take silence as your approval. Thank you very much, members. Those minutes have been approved. Item 4, public question time. We have no general public questions this evening. So I go on to item 5, planning applications. Members, you have all been notified, but for people watching on the YouTube, I'd just like to point out that application 5B, which is application number 20-01515 full 197 London Road, Black Knockley, has been removed from the agenda this evening. We have withdrawn it because we've now had confirmation that the applicant is willing to agree the affordable housing contribution, which was the main reason for refusal. A new evening for this application could be the 30th of March, but at the latest the 30th of April, when we'll have it presented to us. So if anyone's watching for that application, it has been withdrawn and will not be discussed this evening. We have no items in Part B. The first item in Part A is 5A, application 19-00958 full, 7 Seas Marble and Granite, Coggeshall Road, Kelvedon. We have no statements on this application, so we go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Matthew. Matthew, good evening, and can we have the presentation, please?
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Thank you. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so the application before you this evening is for the erection of 3 dwellings with garages at the access road, turning head and landscaping. And it's the 7 Seas Marble and Granite site, which is accessed off of Coggeshall Road in Kelvedon. Okay, so the site is the rectangular area here. The grade 2 listed building moorings is up here. The watering farm site is just below the site here. There was outline approval on the watering farm site for 35 dwellings, as members might be aware, and there is also now a reserve matters application in for consideration. The river is to the east. So the site's outlined in red. I just wanted to show you a bit of aerial context. So the access road is existing onto Coggeshall Road. You can see the grassed area where primarily the dwellings would be located, and then at the sort of more eastern part of the site, you have the existing workshop that's to be retained at the moment. So you can see the trees which line the north and south boundaries of the site. So these lines that you can see on here, they represent the flood zone. And so flood zone 2 is the sort of lighter blue colour. And then you've got flood zone 3, which is a bit further back. So I'll show you what implications that has later. And then the only other thing to note is the public right of way, which is indicated by this dotted black line. Now, there was originally an application in to convert this workshop to an office. However, that got withdrawn because technically it was built on top of a public right of way. So even though the public right of way actually goes around the building, so yeah, that was withdrawn. So the actual line of the public right of way is actually more over here. So you might be able to see where it's slightly lighter colour. So the map hasn't been updated yet, but the public right of way has been formally moved. Obviously separate to this application, but just for context. And I thought I'd give you a bit of wider context as well, just to sort of give you an idea where the site is, because you might not know it from that sort of closer context. So we've got the station down here, and you've got sort of Fearing over here, got the river. Kelvedon's obviously down this side, and then you've got the Chalkney Meadow site, which was the Carla Homes, which members will be aware of. The watering farm site, you can see it's this parcel here, and then you've got the wider fields beyond, and you can see the public right of way at the back there. Okay. So the proposed site plan, so you have one dwelling which is facing Coggeshall Road, and then you have the others which are perpendicular, which face towards, facing the north-south direction, so towards the countryside to the rear and to Watering Farm on the Severn side. The dwellings are 1.5 story. In the report, the half doesn't seem to have come through very well for some reason. So yeah, just to confirm, it is 1.5 story and not 1 story. And I'll show you those elevations in a second. I think the relationship between this site and the wider context, either side, north and south, is very important, and I'll come back to why later in the report. You can see they've got 2 parking spaces for the dwellings. Main area of garden is at the side, and that's primarily because the site is quite narrow, so there's only a shorter bit of garden at the back there. So yeah, so the gardens are quite big, but that's primarily because they've got that bit at the side. The other point is the flood zone. So if you can just about see this line here, so that is the extent of the flood zone 2, which we saw earlier. So it doesn't actually, the house isn't on the flood zone, but part of the garden is on the sort of flood zone 2. Okay. Oh, have I got anything else? Actually, yes. So the existing business at the moment is to be retained at the bottom. You can't see it on here. It's not shown. The access road at the moment is going to be relaid and slightly improved. And yeah, we'll come back to the trees later on. But yeah, I'll go through the elevations now just quickly, just so you can see them. So as I said, 1.5 story with like a 2-story protecting gable, fairly sizable. All 3 are the same. Just the difference is that plot 1 has the attached garage on the right-hand side, and then the other plots have it on the left-hand side, and the chimney stacks are swapped over. And you can see, quite generous living accommodation on the ground floor, and again 4 double bedrooms on the first floor and a dressing room and suite. And again, yeah, plots 2 and 3 is the same. I think the picture looks a bit distorted, but it is the same as plot 1. So okay, right. So the first thing I want to look at with this, just to explain to members as best I could, in terms of the relationship between this site and the Watering Farm site. So I've included an extract of the Reserve Matters layout, which is currently for submission below. You'll see that here. So what I've done, because unhelpfully the current application doesn't include the workshop at the rear, it's quite hard to work out where these dwellings would be in relation to these dwellings. So I've got a side-by-side comparison, and what I've done is I've measured and taken a line. So this dotted line here is the extent of the site area, which is shown up here. So you've got this bit of here which would be over here, which isn't shown. So if we take quite a crude approach, plot 1 would probably be in this kind of area here. So like coming onto the carport and the garden of this property on the frontage. And then plot 2 would be a bit further down. So you're probably looking more around sort of here. So the Garns 6, 7 and possibly 8, looking on to those. And then plot 3 would be more about here, I would say, which obviously then looking into plot 10 of the reserve matters submission. So so a few points to consider. The separation distances are less than 25 meters back or front to back, or as commonly is accepted as back to back. So the distances are around 21 to 23 meters front to back. So as you have seen, these properties do have first floor accommodation, 2 bedrooms and a landing window. So given that, and given the proximity, which is below 25 and in close proximity to the boundary anyway, about 5 meters from here to here, 6 meters perhaps, it's officer's opinion that this would give rise to an unacceptable opportunity to overlook the most sensitive garden areas for the proposed dwellings on the reserve matters application. Now, in terms of changes, the application has been negotiated to get to this point fairly extensively. The reserve matters application has come in since the submission of this application, and that at that particular point we did raise concerns about the relationship. I don't think it perhaps was quite appreciated before that point, but certainly there is a need to create a harmonious layout between the two sites, because this site has an outline application approval for 35 dwellings, and if this development here is allowed as it is at the moment, that potentially would compromise how we bring or how this site would come forward, and that could impact on the quantum or potentially create an unattractive layout. And I think the key thing with this site is that the access was approved at outline stage in terms of where it is, and a parameter was actually shown in this strip of land here to say it was residential. So there isn't really a lot of scope to change this to anything different because the access has been approved. So really the change needs to come from this site, which we're currently considering this evening. And the applicant wasn't willing to change the scheme any further to address this point, because it would need the removal of the first floor windows looking in a southerly direction, and that would potentially have heritage implications or greater heritage implications in terms of design as well as urban design principles. So it would have needed a bit more of a rethink than just taking that accommodation out. And certainly putting like obscure glazing and things like that wouldn't be a good design solution either. So yeah, that's that relationship. So it wouldn't be it would be poor. An officer's view is that that would constitute significant harm to future occupiers. Moving on to the extent of the tree works. So I've included an extract from the arboricultural report. So you can see that the majority of the trees are to be retained. Some of them are to be removed in the grey. Now, the properties, because the site is quite narrow, are quite close to the trees. So plot 1 and the hedges. So plot 1 would be about 1 metre, while plots 2 and 3 would be about 5 or 6 metres away from the boundary. So taking into account this short distance, it's highly likely that those trees would be removed in future by future occupiers, because as it's shown, there is no protection for those trees. So given how close they are, there's a good probability that they would potentially be removed in future by people that would, if these houses were approved, would live there. And I think obviously the loss of the trees in itself would be bad from a biodiversity point of view, but in terms of wider views across from the public right of way, what would be created then would be a quite harsh edge, and also a close border fence, likely for security. So yeah, it just, so the layout as it is at the moment wouldn't give sufficient protection to those trees, and officers therefore would attribute harm to that in the planning balance, and say, well, actually there needs to be some protection because they do serve an important function. So I think it's important to note that the way officers had thought this could be done is by including a management strip, which we often do on some of the bigger sites, which would then be outside of the ownership of the future occupiers, but be controlled by a management company. But the applicant wasn't willing to do that because, again, that would be quite a fundamental change to what had already been negotiated. So, so they weren't willing to do that. So officers have no choice but to, add that as a reason, a combined reason for refusal in this case. I think it is worth noting as well that with the access road, which is to be resurfaced, we need a bit more information from the developer about how they're going to do that. Obviously, making sure that we protect root protection areas of the trees that are on this side should obviously development be allowed or approved. Okay, so just quickly taking you through some of the site photos then. They are a bit old, but I have driven past the site on a fairly frequent basis, and I do, it hasn't really changed if at all. So so it's still current. So this is at the access point looking towards the grade 2 listed property, the moorings, and then the bend in the road. And then this is just looking along Cockleshall Road the other way, and then you've got the watering farm site just over here. So I've walked into the site and then I've turned around to look back towards the access. So you can see the trees on either side and the grassed area primarily where the dwellings would be located. Again, this is looking like turning 180 degrees, looking down towards the workshop area at the moment, or as it was then. And again, just another picture just showing the workshop area. Now I'm in the workshop area looking back up towards the access point. Okay, now I'm at the entrance looking, so the field is behind and the public right of way runs along that side over here. And then there's some highway land here where some cars park. And then one looking down the site, and then you can see the workshop in the back. And then this is a photo looking at the watering farm site. And then you can see the houses that go around the Cockleshall Road. They're over here. Just a quick point. So this, I wanted to show this for two reasons. One, it showed how the layout was originally submitted for 5 dwellings, but also in terms of the visibility displays, which are compliant for 30 miles per hour road, and Essex highways have no objection. And as you'll have seen this evening, apologies for the late circulation, but the HRA has now been paid. So that is the reason for refusal 2 is now no longer necessary. So officers are only recommending reason for refusal 1. The Environment Agency have come back and also not objected. So in this case, officers are satisfied that the development wouldn't be unacceptable with a low risk, or satisfied it would be acceptable, sorry, with a low risk future occupiers from flooding, given where it is. So just to briefly sum up then, so it's outside of settlement limits, so it's in conflict with the adopted development plan, but we don't have a 5-year land supply as we know, and there is no paragraph 11D harm, so like no significant heritage harm. So the tilted balance applies. We've got 3 dwellings towards the housing supply, which is a benefit, but if we were to prove this as it is now, then that potentially will compromise the quantum on the on the watering farm site, so the benefit potentially is less. Accessible location and jobs during construction is a benefit. The harm is the less than substantial one to the greater listed building, which is the development of any part of the site for anything. And then, as I've said and hopefully explained, would give rise to detrimental overlooking of the watering farm site and have insufficient protection for the established trees at the rear of the northern boundary, and if removed would have significant detrimental visual impacts. So officers have come to the conclusion that the harms would outweigh the benefits in this case in the tilted balance, and the recommendations for refusal. And I won't read the reason for refusal out, but it just basically encapsulates the reasons set out, basically the harms in that summary I just read to you. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for a very detailed and interesting presentation. I have, first of all, Councillor Mrs. Spray wishing to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, there's a lot going on around this area. I think it's slightly out of the ordinary in a way, because the reason for the officer's recommendation for refusal is because of the impact that the proposed dwellings we're looking at tonight, the impact they would have on the adjacent site, which isn't yet developed. So it is a little bit unusual, and very much appreciate Matt's very clear presentation, which I think helps certainly help me get my head around what is proposed to fit in where. But I can see why it would be a problem, and since the other site has got outline permission, and I remember it, and the access has been agreed, the onus really was on this site to fit in, if I can use a non-planning term, but I think that is really what officers were looking for, and the applicant has not really managed to achieve that. I mean, there are no objections from highways, although I know that that was a concern of the parish council. I read through their objections, which were very, very well set out. The historic buildings consultant has, I think, sort of modified his objections down to a less than substantial harm to the listed building. So that would not be a specific concern for us. So it really does come down to how these homes, if they were to be built as presented to us, how they would affect the amenities and so on the adjacent site. So I think officers have on the whole got this right, and I don't think there's anything very much more than I want to say. It's unusual, but in some respects a fairly straightforward reason for a recommendation for refusal. So I will support that and move refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Does it find a seconder before I move on?
I'm happy to second you.
Thank you, Councilman. I have got you down for speaking next. I come to you now.
Thank you. Well, I've got some sympathy with the applicant here, who couldn't have foretold that you're going to have the sort of indicative layout that on the watering farm side that's come forward. And I mean, he's rather a prisoner of the shape of the plot. But I agree. We're in tilted balance territory here because of our lack of 5-year supply, and I think you've got the two major harms. The first one, the impact on future occupiers of the watering farm site, because we have to take into consideration future residents as well as any current ones. And then there's that second negative impact on the rural character of the area by the possible boundary treatment at the rear of the site, and you add those two together, and I think they do outweigh the benefits. So happy to second. But a question possibly for officers. I mean, would it be possible, sort of given the difficult layout of this site, for it to be developed except by one-story dwellings? Because I can't see that anything above 1 story is not going to overlook. So, I mean, I wonder if you agree with that statement.
Thank you, Councillor. Surely the trees would still be a problem, and they are a very, very important problem. But I will ask Matthew to respond.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think you're correct in that anything that faces onto that watering farm site would need to have no first floor fenestration to make sure that they couldn't overlook. So it might be that, yes, single story is the only way forward. It might be that they could design something where you have a first floor accommodation with views out the back, but not at the front. But yes, Councillor Scattergood is very correct as well about the trees at the back. So all in all, it would need quite a fundamental redesign, in officers' opinion, to be acceptable. And I think something could be acceptable there, but it's just not this scheme, unfortunately.
Thank you, Matthew. Now I have Councillor Abbott wishing to speak. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with everything that's been said so far, but I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, on the trees, I'm pleased to see that on this occasion, this is a reason for refusal. However, if you compare the slide we were shown by Mr. Wild with the aerial view, which I'm looking at now from Google, which says it's 2021, might be older than that, but it's certainly fairly recent because it shows all the work that's been done on the bend for both the other two permitted sites, which is quite recent. There's far more trees along those boundaries there than was shown on the plan. So unless a load have been taken out since, and it's very clear, and I totally agree with the officer, that if we granted permission, there would be enormous pressure on those trees to cut them back. I mean, they're actually, the canopies on some of them are actually almost touching the houses. So clearly that's not tenable. But what I find curious is the officer said just now, and I listened very carefully, that not only was there a problem with the landscape impact of losing those trees, both the direct losses and the potential losses, but he also mentioned biodiversity. And yet at the top of page 23, the ecology view, the officer ecology view within BDC is there's no objection. Now, this seems to be a running theme. Why aren't we including that as a reason for refusal? The loss of so many trees on the edge of the countryside and next to a priority habitat, the river, surely we should be adding in the biodiversity loss of those trees, which is in our own adopted policies. That's my first question. The second question relates to the summary, and actually, I don't know if Mr. Wilder spotted it, said confusion. I think it should have said conclusion at the end there. Typo, I know, and spell checker sometimes can be really unhelpful, can't it? Why aren't we including a reason for refusal that this is an unadopted site in the countryside? And this comes back to what I said about the Hatfield-Peveril applications. Just because another unadopted site in the countryside has been given permission, surely we shouldn't then be saying, well, this one, and I disagree on this with Councillor Mann, could be considered for development. Because then if we granted that, the landowner for the next site could come along and say, well, those two have got it, and so on and so on. It's like a domino effect. So that's my second question. Why aren't we including that? Because this is an unallocated site in the countryside, contrary to our local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Matthew, could you respond?
Yes, yes, certainly. Thank you. So yeah, in relation to the biodiversity, as you know, we have the council's landscape team and we have the ecology officers. I think when I was referring to biodiversity, it's more of a sort of generic statement. I think with actual tangible harm in terms of biodiversity, which is what the ecology officer would assess in terms of impact on species and such like, that in itself wouldn't be so significant that it would then justify the loss, justify refusing the application in its own right. I think it is, a small part of the overall loss of the trees from a visual point of view, but it is still relevant. I agree. In terms of the reason for refusal, and not including the contrary to the outside settlement limits, because of the date of our local plan and those settlement limits, it's very difficult for us to simply defend a reason on those grounds alone. We'd have to consider that planning balance, and which is what we've tried to do in the reason for refusal that's before members this evening. Bring all of those aspects together, and we have said it is contrary to the development plan in that refusal. So yeah, it's basically just making sure that we're on the most solid grounds to refuse, so we don't potentially lose one refusal reason if it did go to appeal. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, could I just come back
Thank
on
you.
that point, because it doesn't actually say that in the reasons for refusal. It said it in the conclusion we were given by officer, but I can't see where in the refusal, either the one that's in the papers or the amended one, it mentions the local plan. And I'm not, to be clear, saying that he said, Mr. Wild said, we can't have that as a standalone reason. I agree. I'm saying we should have it in as one of the reasons, as it's a matter of fact and was included in the conclusion. It's contrary to the local plan.
Do you want to come back, Matthew?
Yes, please. So we've actually said the development plan. So actually that includes the local plan, includes the core strategy, and it would now include the part one of the new local plan, or the strategic policies. So it is sort of encapsulated within that, if you like. So I think we have included it.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Mann, you wish to come back?
If I may, Madam Chair, to help Councillor Abbott perhaps to see my view. I'm an avid reader of appeal decisions, and when we're in tilted balance territory, because we haven't got a 5-year land supply, you'll find inspectors repeatedly saying that all our policies are out of date. And that out of dateness also, unfortunately, appears to some of them to apply to development boundaries. So the fact that we haven't got a 5-year land supply, in fact, we're quite a way short of it, means that our existing development boundaries sort of come into question. And that is why inspectors are granting appeals on grounds that we would ordinarily say is in the countryside. So I mean, these are strange times in which we're living in planning terms. We all, to some degree or another, think that the planning system is broken, but the key is the lack of the 5-year land supply. And that leaves us open to all sorts of interpretations by visiting inspectors.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Unsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very, very briefly, I know the Kelvedon local plan, neighbourhood plans on the way. Has that got any weight or bearing in this? Whether it's not mentioned at all in this? Thank you.
I don't know. Matthew, would you like to just respond on that? I don't think it's completed, has it?
Thank you, Councillor Scattergood. So I can't remember if I mentioned it actually at the end of my presentation. If I didn't, I meant to. In the report, I think the neighbourhood plan set out Reg 14 stage. It's now gone to Reg 15 stage. So it's still got limited weight in decision making. and hence why it hasn't been, picked apart in the report. Reg 15 is still limited weight, I would say. I've checked that with policy colleagues. So, I think that was only I think it was only like a week or so ago that did change. So yeah, so it's still a little way off from being formally adopted, but obviously once it is, then we can give it full weight and then obviously look at the policies and give weight to that decision making.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, no one else has indicated they wish to speak, and it has been moved and seconded that we refuse this application. It's been moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray and seconded by Councillor Mann. I'm now going to put that to the vote. This is for refusal. Councillor Abbott.
For refusal.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
For.
Councillor Horner.
For refusal.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For refusal.
Councillor Monday.
For refusal.
Councillor Parker.
For refusal.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For refusal.
Councillor Wrench. I'm sorry, Councillor Unsworth.
For refusal.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I haven't crossed Councillor Wrench off my list. Thank you, members. That application has been refused unanimously. We'll now move on to item 5C, application number 20015684, White House Business Park, White Ash Green, Halstead. We do have a statement from Quinster Green and Halstead Rural Parish Council, which is going to be made by Councillor Paul Foster. Good evening, Councillor Foster.
Good evening, Chairman.
Would you like to make your statement? You have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I wish to make 2 comments. First, the Parish Council has not been formally consulted by Braintree District Council regarding this planning application. The application was validated on the 9th of November last year, and our clerk has checked our correspondence, but we've not received a normal notification that the application was registered and our views sought. This is of concern as we only occasionally have applications for major development within our parish. Thankfully, a member of the Parish Council made some inquiries, and we were subsequently advised just last Monday that the application was going to this planning committee. Secondly, we raise no objection to the application and we support the recommendation for approval. However, we wish to see the following conditions added or amended. Firstly, HGV delivery hours to be restricted to Monday to Friday, 8 AM to 6 PM, and Saturdays, 8 AM to 12 noon, with no deliveries on Saturday afternoons, Sundays, bank holidays, and public holidays. Those residents who live in White Ash Green have expressed concern about additional HGV movements during out of hours arising from the expansion of the business. So a restriction on delivery times would serve to protect the amenity of the surrounding area. Secondly, construction hours to be restricted to Monday to Friday, 8 AM to 6 PM, and Saturdays from 8 AM to 12 noon. There's no assessment in the planning documentation that I can see about the number of HGV movements associated with the demolition of the 2 buildings and the construction of the new building, nor of the proposed hours of working. Therefore, in order to protect amenity of local residents in White Ash Green and the occupiers of Oaklands, which shares the same access to White House Business Park, we ask that an additional condition is added to ensure that noise and traffic movements during demolition and during site construction are restricted to daytime during the week and Saturday mornings only. And finally, we wish to see the scope of Condition 8, which is external lighting, extended to include provision for local residents, in addition to bats. The Parish Council would like the terms of the proposed lighting scheme enhanced so that it considers the local residents' concerns about potential impact from light spill, sky glow, and glare, and its effect on them, not just upon its effect on biodiversity. This will allow residents to continue to enjoy their residential amenities without being affected by intrusive light levels. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed for making your statement on behalf of your parish council. We do appreciate it. Thank you. And I am sorry that you were not informed, and I'm sure that someone will be looking into that and explaining to you what went wrong if something did go wrong. But thank you for attending. I will now pass over to Katie, who's going to make the presentation.
Just bear with me while I share my screen.
You're a little quiet, Katie.
Is that better?
A little, yes. Can everyone hear Katie all right? Thumbs up if you can. Yes, you can. All right.
I'll speak loudly.
Thank you.
So the application before you tonight is for the demolition and removal of some existing buildings and the erection of an extension to an existing warehouse at the White House Business Park in White Ash Green, Halstead. So this is just showing you the location plan. So this site area there is outlined in red. So you have the existing warehouse here, and then the proposed extension is actually shown on this plan outlined in pink. Access here, as you come up Slow Hill, the site is there on the northern side. The blue line there shows the outline of the applicant's ownership. So just taking a look at an aerial view. So the building is here, subject to the application. Also within the site are these two long, thin linear buildings used for the same business, for the same purpose. The access off Slow Hill comes up here, the access to the site on the northern side of the road. You've got the nearest residential property here, which is about 130 metres from the proposed extension, and is screened by this quite a substantial belt of trees here. And then you've got a further residential property here at the access into the site. So the existing block plan, just in a bit of a larger scale, shows the existing building here and car parking at the front of the site. They're those two long linear buildings along the edge of the site. There's also an existing earth mound which screens the building from the west. It's about 1.5 metres in height. So the proposed block plan shows the extent of the extension here, outlined in coloured in pink. The little buildings here are to be demolished in order to facilitate the proposed extension. It's proposed also to extend this earth mound up alongside the proposed extension and just past it. And there will be a series of tree planting also along the side and to the rear of the proposed extension. So in terms of the existing floor plan, it's currently used for storage and distribution. It's a B8 use, so it's big warehousing and offices. In terms of the existing elevations, it's a large building already, but it is quite simplistic in form, quite low level in height, quite modest proportion. So that's the existing front elevation at the top and the existing rear elevation on the bottom. The proposed floor plan shows only part of the existing floor plan, but this shows the extension to an L-shaped design, which would be on the rear of the building. So in terms of proposed elevations, which are shown in the darker grey, the extension would just continue the existing form of the building to the same height, to the same design, and would mimic the existing materials. So the application is supported by a landscaping plan, which I mentioned earlier includes the extension of this earth mound here that's shown in green, and would also include a series of tree planting, which would provide a screen and a softening edge as you viewed the extension across from the countryside from the north. T1, 2, 3 and 4 are existing trees which are proposed to be retained. No trees are required to be removed in order to facilitate the development. So just take you through some existing photos. So this is the front elevation as existing. This is the side elevation of the building, so the front elevation here and the rear at this end, which is where the extension would be. The other side elevation, just to note, there are some containers that have been, about 6 storage containers that have been put on site as kind of emergency storage. They would be removed should the application be approved, and there's a condition to that effect to make sure that does happen. So these are the buildings at the rear of the site currently that are proposed to be removed. And then looking back towards the building, and these 2 buildings here would be those that would be removed. A little bit of a closer view of the rear extension. So the office building would be removed. These containers here would also be removed from the site, and then the extension would attach here to the rear elevation of the building. So this is a view a little further back. So this is the subject building here. So quite unassuming really in the landscape, and obviously the design and the form of it would just extend out from what is existing. And just a little bit of a closer view, which shows these ad hoc buildings here, and the containers would be removed, so there'd be less clutter on site as a result of the proposed extension. I just want to make some comments on the Parish Council's representation. We did in error consult the wrong parish, for which we have apologised, and we will be looking into, obviously not to make that mistake again, but we did, as soon as we'd realised, made sure that the correct parish council had the option to consider the application and to provide any comments, and speaker committee, which they have. Obviously, if they didn't have the time, we would have deferred the application from this committee, but we were able to secure their comments in advance. In terms of their suggested recommendations for the conditions, in terms of the heavy goods vehicles, there's not such a condition on the current building or the current permission at the site. So there is a condition 5, which is recommended, which restricts opening hours or any operation of the business to between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday. So that mimics the conditions that are on the 2015 and 2018 permission for the existing part of the building. So if we put a condition on that restricts HGV deliveries, it would only refer to the extended part of the building. So it would be impractical because the whole site wouldn't be covered by that condition, and it would also probably be unenforceable because we wouldn't be able to tell where those deliveries, if they were servicing the extension or the existing part of the building. So we, as I've said, we would advise that we continue with condition 5, which is a kind of catch-all to prevent the business operating outside of 8 to 6 Monday to Friday. In terms of construction hours, we don't have that condition proposed currently, but it's reasonable to attach it if as members you felt it necessary. Our standard condition is there for you, which the only difference between that and what the parish council is seeking is it allows construction up to 1 PM on a Saturday rather than 12 PM. This is the standard condition we apply consistently across the district where it's applicable. So it would be my advice that if you wanted to attach such a condition, that you utilise a standard condition, and there would be no reason to reduce the hours on Saturday to 12 PM in this case, especially given the residential properties are some distance from the site. It's not surrounded by residential properties. In terms of the lighting condition, the parish council would like to see residential amenity added into that. If you feel that's necessary, which it is reasonable to do so, we could amend the condition as I've set out there. So we just add those parts in red, which would ensure that any lighting scheme that is submitted considers biodiversity, but it also considers the impact on neighbouring residential properties. So just as a conclusion, the proposal is for an extension to an existing warehouse. It is in a countryside location, however, local and national planning policy support the expansion of all types of businesses in rural areas and really encourage rural enterprise and encourage businesses to thrive, which this currently is. The development would be contained within the existing developed area of the site, and the proposal extends the form and the design of the existing building and also has matching materials. It would include the removal of the existing buildings and containers, which would have a positive impact on the appearance of the site and the wider landscape. The building and extension will be visible in views because it's quite an open landscape there. However, we consider the impact to be limited. The application is supported by a landscaping scheme, which is also conditioned. That would provide the extension of the earth mound, which provide from screening, and also tree planting on that and to the rear of the building, which provides screening and a softening to the edge. So as you viewed it across the countryside. There's anticipated that there would also be reduced vehicle movements. The company currently has a site in Sudbury also, which would no longer be required if this extension got approved. So the company would solely operate from this site in Housted. So the movements that currently happen between this site and the Sudbury site would cease. There would be the creation of an extra 3 to 4 jobs. And also we consider there be no detrimental impact on residential amenity. So our recommendation is the application is granted subject to conditions. Members could consider adding an additional construction hours condition, which would be reasonable, and also amending condition 8 to include residential amenity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you for getting to the bottom of why the parish council wasn't consulted. It happens quite often in my ward. There is confusion as to which parish when they have a postal address with a different parish on them. I have, first of all, I've got Councillor Ritchie that wishes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, officers, for the presentation, and thank you for Paul for his comments as well as part of his representations. I think all in all, Madam Chairman, this is a proposal which I am would like to propose that we accept officers' recommendations for approval. I think it's within well within the bounds of the existing business and shows a moderate expansion of that business within their current confines. I do take into account, obviously, there's some possibility for us to kind of strengthen some of the conditions, but I think our general suite of conditions do cover what's proportionate to other like type businesses across our district. So I would be happy to move officers' recommendations for approval, but also subsequent speakers, if they wish to amend some of those conditions, I would also be flexible to accept those as part of the recommendation for approval, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Ritchie, as you're moving it, are you not content to move it with a standard construction hours and amending the lighting condition? Because
yes, I am. Yes,
you are right. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I have now. Can I have a seconder before I move on, Councillor Cunningham, and then I've got you next to speak. So I come to you next, Councillor Cunningham. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was going to suggest, I think the standard construction conditions that are in place are proportionate for this. I think, am I right in saying that Councillor Ritchie was happy to propose the additional lighting condition, because that is something I think I'd be very receptive to, and I think that'd be very helpful to those residents in the close vicinity.
Yes, he was, Councillor Cunningham. Yes.
Very happy to second on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we've got to support our little industries in the countryside. This seems to be quite a good unit. On page 61, para 4, I totally agree with the reasons for them wishing to provide additional storage. Due to current situation on COVID, it's very difficult for companies, and I'm going back to some very old terms. If indeed they participate in the JIT just-in-time supply situation, they must have stock. It's important now that everybody is fully supported and they can reach their targets, even these very difficult and potentially long-distant problems. I don't think they're going to be solved immediately, so those companies that can survive should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I now come to Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I think this is an acceptable proposal, and it's good to see the mitigation of tree planting and that we're not losing any trees on this site. So they're all positives. Interesting comment from the parish council about lighting. I think it backs up what I've said consistently. Actually, it's not just about habitats. People, particularly in rural areas, do care about this issue, and getting the design right is really important. And actually, I've been meaning to say this for a few meetings. The bat lighting condition and the wording on that one originally was the right wording, by the way, is good. But we ought to be considering, actually, I think, and I'm happy to talk to officers about this, what it says in the National Planning Policy Framework is the 3 actual points are amenity, habitat, but also the landscape, the nighttime landscape in rural areas. So I think maybe we need to reword our lighting condition to cover those 3 points, because that's what it says in the NPPF. So I'm happy on this occasion to support the proposal. I have just one question for officers. We have a lot of these sort of sites in the district where farmyards have become effectively commercial and industrial estates, and it's always concerned me. One not too far away from where I live, we did get a regularisation, a certificate on it. What sort of officer's view on this? Because this site, I believe, is still classed as in the countryside, so it doesn't have a planning entity, from what I understand, as a commercial site. Should that be something we're looking at in terms of the local plan for the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I will ask Katie if she would like to come back on that, or if that's something we ought to discuss outside this meeting.
I think it probably is for discussion more so outside of the meeting, but there are these sites across the district which are they don't have an employment area allocation, but they've just kind of come about over time, and you know, they are kind of historic and there's nothing we can do about them now, but obviously we try to direct new employment use development to those allocated employment areas, but beyond that I think it's probably, yes, something for outside this meeting.
Thank you, Katie. I've got 2 in my ward and I do understand the situation. Councillor Abbott, I think this is something we need to discuss with officers when we're discussing the new plan.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I know the site very well, and I do concur with the comments attributed to the parish council about the lighting glare, because literally this is a site in the middle of the countryside, so I completely take that on board. But I do support the application. Can I just to get some complete understanding about the working hours and that kind of thing? Am I right in thinking that because there wasn't something there already, we are mimicking, because we wouldn't be able to restrict this new building to hours, because that would then inhibit deliveries and that go into the buildings there already? Is that right? That's why we have to obviously be inclusive of what's already there. Am I right understanding that? Thank you.
I think you are correct, and I mean our standard hours are 1 hour more on a Saturday than the parish council are requesting, and if we have the standard hours for everyone, I think it's fairer. So, but if Katie wishes to come back, I'll let her come back.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is maybe the HGV point.
Oh yeah.
The condition we're suggesting mimics what's on the 2015 and 2018 permission for the existing building, which is just like a catch-all: no business shall take place between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday, and no business on Saturdays, Sundays or bank holidays. If we put a HGV, for example, condition on this permission, it relates only to this part of the development, so we couldn't control it for the existing part of the building, so it would be completely unenforceable for us to control.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. Well, members, it has been moved by Councillor Ritchie, seconded by Councillor Cunningham, with the standard construction in, and also the amended lighting condition, and that is what I'm going to be putting to the vote. So it's for all those in favour. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Bowers.
For.
Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Horner.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Mann.
For.
Councillor Monday.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spray.
For.
Councillor Unsworth.
For.
Thank you, members. That application has been granted unanimously. I'd like to thank Councillor Foster for attending, and I know that I now know what happened and why you were not consulted, and I hope you're satisfied with the explanation, and I hope you are content that we've put the standard construction in and the amended lighting condition, 2 things that you really did want. So good night, and thank you very much, Councillor Foster, for attending. Thank you. Members, that brings us to the end of our planning meeting, and I'm going to close the meeting at 8:17, and I thank you very much for your attendance. It's a bit shorter than last time, and I would like to say good night, and I won't happy journeys to your beds. No traveling these days. And I will pass over to Emma, who will conclude the meeting for me. And I'd like to thank Emma for her assistance during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, before I ask the webcasting officer to terminate the broadcast on the YouTube channel, please can I remind members that we will be retaining performance data to your connection to this meeting in the event that we have a legal challenge to this particular meeting. Webcasting officer, can you terminate the broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel?